Park Ji-hoon stood in his Seoul penthouse office, staring out at the Han River as autumn painted the city in golden hues. At 35, he had built a renewable energy empire that made him one of Korea's youngest billionaires. But success had come at a devastating personal cost that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The fertility specialist's diagnosis 3 months earlier had been delivered with clinical detachment that made devastating news sound almost routine. Childhood illness had left him capable of fathering children, but only through complex medical procedures that required a willing partner. His demanding lifestyle and the intense media scrutiny that surrounded his every move made finding such a partner nearly impossible. His grandmother, Park Soon-ja, the formidable woman who had raised him after his parents' death, and who remained the one person capable of making him feel like a scolded child despite his considerable achievements, had been characteristically direct about his situation. "Ji-hoon, money cannot buy you a family, but it can buy you time to figure out what really matters," she had said during their last conversation before retreating to the family's ancestral home in Andong. Elite Fertility Solutions specialized in discreet arrangements for high-net-worth individuals who needed absolute confidentiality, along with the highest standards of medical care. When they presented him with profiles of potential surrogates, Ji-hoon approached the selection process with the same analytical precision he applied to business acquisitions, reviewing medical histories, psychological evaluations, and background checks with the thoroughness of someone accustomed to making decisions involving millions of dollars. Profile number 7 stopped him cold, though he couldn't immediately articulate why. Lee Yu-jin's photograph showed intelligent eyes and a genuine smile, but it was her story that captured his attention. Written in careful clinical language, but revealing glimpses of a life marked by both tragedy and remarkable resilience, that intrigued him in ways he wasn't prepared to examine closely. Chapter 2. The Woman Behind the File. Lee Yu-jin's background revealed a Seoul National University graduate with a degree in early childhood education, whose promising teaching career had been interrupted when her younger brother was diagnosed with leukemia at 16. The medical bills had consumed her family's savings and forced her father to sell the small restaurant that had supported them for 2 generations, leaving them drowning in debt that seemed impossible to overcome. Yu-jin had left her beloved teaching position to work multiple jobs while caring for her brother and managing his complex treatment schedule. She had cleaned offices at night, tutored wealthy children during the day, and spent weekends translating documents for international businesses, all while maintaining the optimistic demeanor that her psychological evaluation described as remarkably stable given her circumstances. Her brother had died 3 years later. Despite her sacrifices and the family's financial ruin, the crushing medical debt remained, made worse by their father's subsequent heart attack and her mother's depression-related inability to work. Yu-jin had turned to surrogacy not as a casual decision, but as a desperate attempt to earn enough money to save her parents' home and provide for their ongoing medical needs while honoring her family obligation. What struck Ji-hoon most profoundly was a single line buried in the psychological evaluation. Subject demonstrates exceptional capacity for selfless love and maintains strong belief in the importance of family bonds, despite personal losses that would have broken many individuals. Dr. Kim had warned him against becoming emotionally invested in the selection process, advising him to focus on medical compatibility and practical considerations rather than personal stories that might complicate what should be a straightforward business arrangement. But something about Yu-jin's profile suggested depths of character and experience that intrigued him in ways that purely clinical evaluations could not capture, hinting at a strength forged through adversity that he found himself wanting to understand better. Chapter 3. The First Meeting. The conference room at Elite Fertility Solutions had been meticulously designed to facilitate delicate conversations with maximum discretion and comfort. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, and soundproof walls created an environment where wealthy clients and potential surrogates could negotiate arrangements that would affect multiple lives while maintaining the illusion that they were simply discussing another business transaction. When Yu-jin entered the room, Ji-hoon was immediately struck by the disconnect between her file photograph and her presence in person. The picture had captured her features accurately enough, but it had missed the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from her slight frame and the intelligence that sparkled in her eyes, even as she maintained the respectful demeanor appropriate for someone meeting a potential employer worth billions of won. She wore a simple navy dress that had clearly been chosen specifically for this meeting. Professional but not expensive, modest but flattering in a way that suggested she understood the importance of making a good impression without appearing to try too hard. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun that emphasized her elegance, and her only jewelry was a small gold cross necklace that caught the light when she performed a respectful bow and "Mr. Park, it's an honor to meet you," she said, her voice carrying the melodic accent of Busan, where she had grown up before moving to Seoul for university studies that had once promised a bright future. Ji-hoon found himself studying her more intently than he had intended, looking for signs of the desperation or calculation he had expected from someone willing to enter into such an unusual arrangement. Instead, he saw wariness mixed with determination, and something that looked like genuine kindness despite the inherently transactional nature of their meeting and the financial pressures that had brought her to this point. The agency coordinator guided them through standard preliminary discussions about medical procedure, legal requirement, and financial arrangements. But it was Yu-jin's final question that revealed the depth of consideration she had given to every aspect of the arrangement and her understanding of its emotional complexities. Chapter 4. The Decision and its Consequences. 3 days later, Ji-hoon informed Elite Fertility Solutions that he wanted to proceed with Yu-jin as his chosen surrogate. The decision had surprised him with its swiftness. He typically spent weeks analyzing major choices from every possible angle, but something about Yu-jin had convinced him that she was exactly what he needed for this most personal of endeavors. The legal paperwork was extensive and complex, covering every conceivable scenario and contingency, with the thoroughness that both parties' lawyers deemed necessary for protecting their clients' interests in an arrangement that crossed emotional, financial, and legal boundaries in ways that required careful documentation. Yu-jin's signature on the final documents was steady and decisive, though Ji-hoon noticed her pause briefly before signing, as if she were making a silent promise to herself about how she would honor the commitment she was undertaking. When she looked up at him after completing the paperwork, there was something in her expression that suggested she understood the magnitude of what they were beginning together. "Thank you for choosing me, Mr. Park," she said simply, her voice carrying both gratitude and determination. "I won't disappoint you or fail in this responsibility." Medical procedures began immediately, with Yu-jin reporting to the fertility clinic for the hormone treatments, and careful monitoring required for the embryo transfer process. Ji-hoon found himself more involved in the process than he had anticipated, attending medical appointments not out of legal obligation, but from genuine concern for Yu-jin's comfort and well-being during what he knew was a physically and emotionally demanding experience. Dr. Kim had warned him that some level of personal connection was normal during surrogacy arrangements, but advised maintaining professional boundaries to avoid complications that could affect both the pregnancy and the legal agreements they had established. However, as Ji-hoon watched Yu-jin navigate the early stages of the process with grace and determination that impressed everyone involved in her care, he began to suspect that maintaining professional distance might prove more difficult than anyone had anticipated, especially given his growing respect for her character and strength. Chapter 5. Unexpected Revelations. The pregnancy was confirmed 6 weeks after the embryo transfer, and Yu-jin's reaction to the news revealed layers of emotion that neither the agency's psychological evaluation nor their brief previous interactions had prepared Ji-hoon to witness. Her joy was immediate and profound, but it was coupled with a protectiveness that went beyond what he had expected from someone who understood this was not her child to keep. "I know this baby isn't mine to keep," she told him after Dr. Kim delivered the confirmation, her hand already resting protectively on her still flat abdomen. "But while it's growing inside me, I'm going to love it and protect it with everything I have. That's the only way I know how to approach this responsibility." As the pregnancy progressed through the first trimester and Yu-jin's body began its miraculous transformation to accommodate the new life she was carrying, Ji-hoon found himself drawn into aspects of the experience he hadn't anticipated. He attended ultrasound appointments not just to receive medical updates about his future child's development, but because he discovered he genuinely wanted to share these milestone moments with the woman who was making his dream of fatherhood possible. Yu-jin's approach to pregnancy was both methodical and deeply loving. She researched nutrition extensively to ensure optimal fetal development, attended every available prenatal class with the dedication of someone who took her responsibilities seriously, and maintained a detailed journal documenting the baby's progress with the careful attention of someone who understood the preciousness of the life she was nurturing on behalf of another. But it was during a routine appointment in the 4th month that Ji-hoon learned something that fundamentally altered his understanding of the woman carrying his child. Dr. Kim, reviewing Yu-jin's latest test results with satisfaction, made what seemed like a casual comment about the remarkable consistency and quality of prenatal care. "It's clear you've done this before," the doctor observed with professional. "Your preparation and natural instincts are those of someone who really understands pregnancy and infant development from personal experience." Yu-jin's face went pale, and she glanced quickly at Ji-hoon with obvious distress before responding with reluctance that suggested she was being forced to reveal something she had hoped to keep private. Yes, I was pregnant once before, several years ago." Chapter 6. The Truth About Her Past. After the appointment that had revealed Yu-jin's hidden history, Ji-hoon asked her to have coffee with him so they could discuss what he had learned in a private setting. She agreed with obvious reluctance, choosing a quiet cafe near the medical building where they could speak freely without attracting attention from the media that occasionally followed his movements through Seoul's business districts. "I should have told you from the beginning," Yu-jin said before he could ask any questions, her voice steady but soft with emotion she was struggling to control. "I was pregnant 5 years ago, when I was 23. I wasn't married, and the father, he wasn't ready for the responsibility that came with having a child." She spoke quietly, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup as if seeking warmth and comfort from the ceramic. "I wanted to keep the baby more than anything in the world. I had everything planned out, how I would continue working while caring for the child, how I would manage financially as a single mother, what kind of life I could provide. But in my 7th month, there were sudden complications that no one had anticipated." Ji-hoon felt something twist painfully in his chest as he watched her struggle to maintain composure, while recounting what was clearly the worst experience. The clinical language she used to describe medical emergencies couldn't hide the devastation that still shadowed her eyes when she spoke about the daughter she had carried for 7 months but had been able to hold for only 6 precious hours. "I didn't include this information in my agency application because I was terrified it would disqualify me from consideration," she continued, her honesty cutting through any pretense or professional distance between them. "But I need you to know that losing her didn't break my ability to love a child properly or care for a pregnancy responsibly. If anything, it made me understand how precious every moment of pregnancy is, how important it is to cherish and protect the life you're carrying while you have the chance to do so." The secrecy was a clear violation of their contract terms, and Ji-hoon's lawyers would undoubtedly advise him that he had grounds for termination if he chose to pursue that option. But looking at Yu-jin as she waited for his response with barely concealed anxiety, he realized that learning about her loss had only deepened his respect for her courage in choosing to carry another child, despite the pain and fear her previous experience must have caused. Chapter 7. A Deepening Connection. Instead of terminating their arrangement as contract law might have suggested, Ji-hoon found himself wanting to understand Yu-jin more completely, not just as the woman carrying his child, but as a person whose strength and complexity intrigued him in ways that had nothing to do with their legal agreement or the baby she was nurturing. He began spending more time with her between medical appointments, initially justifying these meetings as necessary for monitoring the pregnancy's progress, but gradually acknowledging to himself that he simply enjoyed her company and looked forward to their conversations with an anticipation that went beyond professional interest. Yu-jin proved to be remarkably intelligent and well-read, with thoughtful opinions about literature, politics, and social issues that revealed a perspective shaped by experiences very different from his own privileged background. Her insights about Korean society came from ground-level experience, informed by years of struggling to make ends meet and watching how economic pressures affected real families in ways that his wealth had insulated him from understanding. "You see poverty as a problem to be solved with charitable programs and foundation donations," she observed during one of their conversations about his company's social responsibility initiative, her tone gentle but direct. "I've lived it as a daily reality that affects every single decision you make, from what you eat for breakfast to whether you can afford medicine when you're sick. Those are fundamentally different perspectives, and both are necessary for creating solutions that actually work for the people they're meant to help." These discussions often continued long after their official business was concluded, stretching into lunch meetings that had no agenda beyond the genuine pleasure they both found in each other's conversation, and the meeting of minds that seemed to transcend their very different backgrounds and current circumstances. Yu-jin, for her part, seemed to gradually relax the careful professional demeanor she had maintained during their early interactions, sharing stories about her childhood in Busan, her dreams of becoming a teacher who could make a real difference in children's lives, and her regrets about the opportunities she had been forced to sacrifice in order to care for her family during their various crises. Chapter 8. The Realization of Love. By the 6th month of pregnancy, Ji-hoon could no longer deny to himself that his feelings for Yu-jin had evolved far beyond professional interest, gratitude, or even the natural concern one might feel for someone providing such an important service. He found himself thinking about her constantly throughout his business day, looking for excuses to spend time with her, and feeling genuinely happy in ways he hadn't experienced since childhood when they were together. The transformation wasn't just emotional, it was practical as well. Yu-jin's pregnancy had become the most important thing in his life, not just because of the child they were expecting together, but because of his growing concern for her well-being and happiness as an individual who had become precious to him, for reasons that had nothing to do with the baby she was carrying. He found himself making business decisions based partly on how they would affect his schedule with her, declining social invitations that would interfere with their time together, and beginning to imagine a future that included her in ways that went well beyond their current surrogacy arrangement and into territory that scared him with its intensity. The crisis that forced him to confront these feelings came during a routine prenatal appointment, when Yu-jin's blood pressure readings raised serious concerns about potential preeclampsia, a dangerous condition that could threaten both her life and the baby's if not carefully managed. Dr. Kim recommended immediate bed rest and intensive monitoring, with the possibility of early delivery if her condition continued to worsen. Ji-hoon's reaction to this medical emergency was immediate and revealing to anyone who might have been observing his behavior. His first thought wasn't about the baby's safety or the potential complications to their legal arrangement. It was pure, overwhelming terror at the possibility of losing Yu-jin, and the intensity of his fear made him realize that somewhere along the way, he had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with the woman carrying his child. That evening, he sat alone in his penthouse apartment trying to process the implications of what he had discovered about his own feelings, understanding that everything about their carefully structured arrangement would become infinitely more complicated if he acknowledged his love for Yu-jin, but also recognizing that pretending those feelings didn't exist was becoming emotionally and practically impossible. Chapter 9. The Confession and Its Consequences. Ji-hoon's decision to tell Yu-jin about his feelings came after 3 sleepless nights spent weighing the potential consequences of honesty against the impossibility of continuing to hide what had become the most important truth in his life. He chose to visit her at the small apartment where she was following her bed rest orders, bringing dinner from her favorite restaurant as an excuse for his presence. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, after they had finished eating and she was settled comfortably on the couch with pillows supporting her back and her hands resting protectively on her rounded belly. "I know this complicates everything between us, and I know the timing is probably terrible, but I can't keep pretending any." Yu-jin looked at him with the careful, focused attention she gave to anything that seemed important, her dark eyes reflecting both curiosity and concern about what he might be about to reveal. "I'm in love with you," he said simply, the words coming out with less elegance than he had planned but with complete sincerity. "Not because you're carrying my baby, not because of our business arrangement, the gratitude I feel for what you're doing, but because of who you are as a person. I've fallen in love with your strength, your intelligence, your kindness, and the way you see the world with such clarity and compassion despite everything you've been through." The silence that followed was long enough for Ji-hoon to begin regretting his honesty and formulating apologies that might preserve their working relationship, even if his confession had destroyed any hope of something more personal developing between them. When Yu-jin finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady, carrying emotions she had apparently been struggling with as well. "I thought it was just me. I thought I was going crazy, developing feelings for you that went beyond our arrangement." Her admission that she had developed romantic feelings for him as well opened a conversation that continued late into the night, with both of them carefully exploring the implications of what they had acknowledged to each other and what it might mean for their future together, both during the remainder of the pregnancy and in the years beyond. Yu-jin's concerns were both practical and emotional. She worried that their changed relationship might somehow affect her ability to fulfill her obligations under their surrogacy contract, and she feared that Ji-hoon's feelings might be influenced more by the intensity and intimacy of sharing a pregnancy than by genuine love for her as an individual separate from the child she was carrying. Chapter 10. Navigating New Territory. The acknowledgement of their mutual feelings transformed their relationship in ways that were both wonderful and complicated, bringing them closer together while creating new challenges that neither of them had anticipated when they first entered into their business arrangement months earlier. The careful professional distance they had maintained during the early stages of their relationship gave way to genuine intimacy and emotional connection, but they both struggled with questions about how to proceed, given the unusual circumstances that had brought them together, and the legal framework that still technically governed their most important shared experience. Yu-jin's pregnancy continued to progress well despite the earlier concerns about her blood pressure, but the added emotional complexity of their evolving relationship created new pressures and considerations that affected everything from their medical appointments to their daily interactions with each other. She worried about whether Ji-hoon's love for her was sustainable once the pregnancy was over, and they had to navigate the realities of building a relationship between people from very different backgrounds and lifestyles, with all the challenges that such differences might create. "You live in a world I don't really understand," she told him during one of their evening conversations, her voice thoughtful but troubled. "Private jets and business meetings with government ministers, charity galas where people spend more on a single dinner than my family earns in a year. How do I fit into that kind of life? How do we build something real when our worlds are so different? Ji-hoon's response revealed how profoundly his perspective had changed since falling in love with her. I don't want you to try to fit into my old life, because I'm not sure I want that life any. I want us to build a new life together, one that makes sense for both of us and for our child, combining the best of what we each bring to the relationship. The practical challenges were significant and complex. Yu-jin's contract with the surrogacy agency specifically prohibited romantic relationships between clients and surrogates, which meant they were technically in violation of their legal agreement. Ji-hoon's public profile meant that any romantic relationship he entered would be subject to intense media scrutiny that could be invasive and potentially damaging to Yu-jin's privacy and reputation. But perhaps most challenging was the fundamental question of how to build a relationship based on love and mutual choice, rather than financial transaction when a legally binding contract still governed their most intimate connection. The child Yu-jin was carrying and would soon deliver. Chapter 11. The Birth and New Beginnings. Labor began 3 weeks before Yu-jin's due date, starting with mild contractions in the early morning that gradually intensified throughout the day until she called Ji-hoon to meet her at the hospital where their child would. The drive through Seoul's congested afternoon traffic felt endless as he imagined every possible complication that could affect Yu-jin or their baby during the delivery. When he arrived at the maternity ward, Yu-jin was already in active labor, surrounded by medical staff who moved with efficient calm through procedures that seemed miraculous and terrifying in equal measure. Ji-hoon had attended business negotiations worth hundreds of millions of dollars with less anxiety than he felt watching the woman he loved prepare to give birth to their child. "I'm scared," Yu-jin admitted during a brief respite between contractions, reaching for his hand with fingers that gripped tightly enough to remind him of the physical strength that lay beneath her gentle demeanor. "You're the strongest person I know," he told her, meaning it completely and feeling awed by her courage. "You've already survived so much and overcome challenges that would have broken other people. Now you're bringing our baby into the world safely. You can do anything." The birth itself was swift and intense, once Yu-jin's body fully committed to the process, with their son arriving healthy and vigorous, after just 6 hours of labor that left both parents emotionally overwhelmed and physically exhausted. When Dr. Kim placed the baby in Yu-jin's arms, Ji-hoon saw her face transform with a love so profound and immediate that it took his breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered to the baby, tears streaming down her face as she examined his tiny fingers and perfect features. "You're so beautiful, so absolutely." It was only when she looked up at Ji-hoon, her eyes shining with joy and exhaustion, that he realized what should have been obvious from the beginning. Yu-jin wasn't just the woman who had carried his child through a business arrangement. She was the mother of their son, and the three of them were a family in every way that truly mattered. "What should we name him?" she asked, as if the decision naturally belonged to both of them as equal parents. They chose Min-jun, meaning gentle and talented, a name that seemed to capture their hopes for their son's future character and the love that had brought him into existence. Chapter 12. Redefining Family. The weeks following Min-jun's birth brought challenges and joys that neither Ji-hoon nor Yu-jin had fully anticipated, as the legal framework of surrogacy dissolved into irrelevance in the face of the natural family dynamics that emerged as they shared the responsibilities and pleasures of caring for their newborn son. They took turns with night feedings and diaper changes, marveled together at every small development in their baby's growth and personality, and found themselves falling into the comfortable rhythms of partnership that felt as natural as if they had been planning this family together for years, rather than having arrived at parenthood through such unusual circumstances. Yu-jin had initially planned to return to her own small apartment after a brief recovery period that would allow her to transition back to her independent life, but the practical realities of caring for a newborn made such arrangements seem artificial and counterproductive to everyone's well-being, especially when it was clear that both parents wanted to be equally involved in their son's daily care. Ji-hoon's penthouse was gradually transformed to accommodate not just a nursery filled with everything a baby could need, but also the constant presence of the woman he loved and the child they were raising together as equal partners in the most important endeavor of their lives. The media attention was inevitable once news of Ji-hoon's son became public knowledge, but Yu-jin handled the scrutiny and invasive questions with the same quiet strength and dignity she had shown throughout their relationship. Rather than being intimidated by reporters probing questions about her background and her relationship with one of Korea's wealthiest and most prominent men, she spoke honestly about their unconventional beginning and their shared commitment to providing their son with a loving, stable family environment. "People want to make this story more complicated than it really is," she told a sympathetic journalist during her first major interview about their relationship. "But the truth is actually quite simple. We fell in love while we were creating a family together, and now we're committed to being the best parents we can possibly be for our son." Ji-hoon's grandmother, who had returned from Andong specifically to meet her great-grandson, proved to be Yu-jin's strongest supporter within the extended family, declaring after spending an afternoon watching Yu-jin care for Min-jun with natural maternal competence. Finally, my grandson has found a woman who understands what really matters in life. Chapter 13. Love's Perfect Circle. 2 years after Min-jun's birth, Ji-hoon and Yu-jin's wedding took place in a ceremony that perfectly reflected their journey together. Intimate rather than ostentatious, focused on family and genuine emotion rather than social spectacle, and deeply rooted in their shared commitment to the love they had discovered through the most unlikely and unexpected circumstances. The guest list included Yu-jin's parents, who had recovered both their health and their dignity, with the help of Ji-hoon's quiet financial support and genuine care for their well-being, as well as the medical team who had guided them through pregnancy and delivery, and had witnessed their relationship evolve from professional arrangement to profound love. Yu-jin's wedding dress was simple but elegant, chosen specifically to accommodate the fact that she was 3 months pregnant with their second child, a daughter they had already decided to name So Young, meaning eternally beautiful. This pregnancy was fundamentally different from the first, marked by unalloyed joy rather than uncertainty, anticipation rather than anxiety about the future they were building together. In his wedding speech, Ji-hoon spoke about the unpredictable paths that love could take, and the way that what appeared to be purely business arrangements could evolve into the most important and meaningful relationships of one's life. "I hired Yu-jin to give me a child," he told their assembled guests, his voice carrying both humor and deep emotion. "But what she actually gave me was a complete family, a real home, and a love deeper and more fulfilling than anything I had ever imagined possible." Sometimes the most beautiful gifts in life come disguised as simple transactions, and sometimes the most profound love grows from the most practical beginnings. Yu-jin's response reflected the grace and wisdom that had drawn him to her from their very first meeting. "I thought I was simply helping someone become a father while earning money to help my own family through a difficult time. But what I learned was that love doesn't follow the rules and boundaries we try to set for. It grows where it's meant to grow, and it creates families in ways that have absolutely nothing to do with contracts or expectations, or the circumstances that first bring people together." Their life together had settled into comfortable rhythms that successfully combined Ji-hoon's ongoing business responsibilities with family priorities that had become more important to him than any professional achievement or financial milestone. Yu-jin had returned to her beloved teaching, working with young children at a progressive private school that Ji-hoon's educational foundation had established to provide excellent education for students from diverse economic backgrounds. Min-jun was developing into a happy, confident toddler who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both parents. His father's determination and natural leadership ability, combined with his mother's gentle strength and intuitive understanding of others. Watching him play in the garden of their family home, speaking the natural mixture of Korean and English that reflected their multicultural household, Ji-hoon often found himself marveling at the unexpected and circuitous path that had led them all to this moment of perfect contentment and mutual love. The story of their unconventional beginning had become something of a legend within their circle of friends and family, retold as a powerful example of how life's most important gifts often arrive disguised as something else entirely, and how love could bloom and flourish even in the most unlikely soil when tended with care, honesty, and mutual respect. Thank you so much for joining us for this beautiful story about how love can bloom in the most unexpected circumstances, and how what begins as a business arrangement can evolve into the deepest kind of family bond. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please let us know where you're watching from around the world, and share your thoughts about how love sometimes arrives when we least expect it, but most need it. Your global perspectives and personal stories always enrich our community and inspire us to keep sharing these meaningful tales of human connection.